This is the Week 4 College Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Joe DeSalvo, and that's right, Week 4 is here. We've got a number of things to get to. We're going to be talking about the 4-1 Super College, the 4-1 Super Fantasy League. Who are the leaders after 3 weeks? Remember, that league is just getting started. We've got the Helmet Blitz update. I'm going to bring you guys some more contributors to the Helmet Blitz, and of course, we're going to kind of look at some things as we go from week 3 to week 4, some of the bigger questions, some of the bigger observations I've noticed. But let me just kick it off real quick with the Helmet Blitz. You guys are still rolling in with your contributions to get some helmets up there. We've got some new additions this week. We've got West Virginia. We've got Wisconsin. We've got Rutgers. Sort of ho-hum teams this week. But Rich Rod's West Virginia Mountaineers make it into the helmet shelf this week. So those are some of the new additions. And here are some of the contributors. I want to thank Brian Macklin, Jeffrey Edling, Eric Fetty, Ryan Karp, Dennis Connolly, Jamie Rowe, Vance Piner, and of course, Michael Slayton, who says the Texas Longhorns need to be up on that shelf. So you got it, Michael. Texas Longhorns will be up there next week. There are a few more. I'll save a few guys, other guys for next week that just came in before the show. But anyway, thanks again for contributing to the Helmet Blitz, and the link is on the homepage of the site if you want to get your team up there, or you just want to talk some trash and have me shout out some guys on here. Go ahead and get into the Helmet Blitz link on the homepage of the site. But the 4-in-1 Super Fantasy League is in full swing. I was taking a look at the standings before we came on here, and man, with the new rule change this year, it is so tight at the top of the standings. When I look at the top 15, 60 points separate first from 15 right now. And let me just give a shout out to the top 5, Joe Chimo, Chew Bacon, Dr. Barre or Dr. Bear, however you pronounce that, ND Base 2001 is tied with Javon 8 in the 4 spot. That rounds out the top 5. But guys, this league is wide open. It is a 14-week marathon. And remember, you're playing for position right now in the head-to-head tournament. And the eliminator starts in week 5 as well. And right now, the two halves tournament is in full swing. I think we still have another 3 or 4 weeks. So I'll give you guys some shout out as we get closer to the semifinals in that first half tournament in the two halves league. So a lot going on in the 4-in-1 Super Fantasy League, 80 plus entrants this year. And that league is just getting ramped up. And so with that being said, we turn our attention to week 3, week 4 in the season. And, there's a lot of notes that I have a lot on teams and how I did things this week is I looked at our Discord. I looked at some of the talk topics. I looked at a few of the questions that we had after a couple of weeks of the season, see where things stand now. And there's about 20 points, 20 teams, 20 plus players on here that I think warrant some discussion this week as we head into week 4. And I think the one thing that I think about as we're going into 4 weeks into the season is I think we have to start trusting our eyes a little bit. And that is, there's a lot of should I hold? Should I wait? What about this player? And we're going to go through a list of a lot of those players. And my simple response at this point is, look, I know we've got some good teams that are dominating like Oregon. We don't really see a true rotation there because they're still able to shuffle their third team through that game. And then we have some other really good matchups that allow us to really identify the tight rotations in some of these teams. But there's still a lot of question marks. But we do have to start trusting our eyes as we see things and interpret them. And let's go with, and we'll start running down the top. And I'm going with the games that are in order this week, or most of them are in order. And when I look at Texas Tech, they have that matchup this week. I believe they play Utah, right? And so the big question is Caleb Douglas. Do we hold Caleb Douglas? What's going on? Well, the one thing we have to realize is that Texas Tech has pretty much just kind of tiptoed through the first 3 games of the season. Arkansas Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State, which is really looking like a bad team this year. they've really just kind of had they've been able to just kind of waltz through the first 3 games of the season. Road games against Utah and Houston coming up next. They're going to face some stiffer defensive competition. We're going to get a really true test of what that Texas Tech offense is going to look like. But through 3 games, Caleb Douglas, eight receptions, whereas the teammates Coy Eakin has a touchdown catch in every game this season, and Reggie Virgil, remember the transfer that came in from Miami of Ohio, he's got 3 touchdowns already. So both of those guys outproducing Caleb Douglas, but I'm okay with holding Caleb Douglas. He had a productive week last week, but I think this is the week where we're really going to start learning about whether or not Caleb Douglas is going to be that long-term option for you guys at Texas Tech. Now, with Utah, let's take a look at Utah. Again, we have to trust our eyes, right? Wayshawn Parker this year, 27 carries, 192 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Zachary Rogers, 36 carries, what is it, 152 yards and 4 touchdowns. So right now, Zachary Rogers is outproducing Wayshawn Parker. Remember, Wayshawn Parker got all of the hype coming in as the starter, projected starter coming in from Washington State. Here's my take. From what I've seen right now through Utah, I don't see how we're going to get anything other than a split backfield between these two guys. The only thing, in my opinion, that's going to create any separation is if one of those guys goes on the shelf due to an injury. If I have Parker or I have Rogers right now, I pretty much have to be resigned to the fact that I think we're going to get a split backfield from Utah the rest of the way, barring any injury. Let's turn our attention to Iowa, who really, I mean, the quarterback Gradowski has really kind of vultured all of the rushing touchdowns. Are we going to see anything change with the Iowa offense? Here's what I would say. If you have running back Kamari Mouton, I think the question is, should we be holding him? The one good thing if you have Mouton is that nobody really produced or looked really good or took advantage of the opportunity when Mouton was out. Let's see how that plays out this week when Iowa plays Rutgers. I think Rutgers will be a little challenged with injuries. If Mouton is going to be that player or close to it that we thought this year, or a fantasy option, I think we have to see it this week because so far, no running back has been able to take advantage of the opportunity that they've gotten in that Iowa backfield. Mouton returns this week, takes advantage of that. We may have our option going forward or may not. Because we'll turn our attention to Wisconsin. Very similar. We thought Wisconsin would return to their roots, get that ground game going. Dylan Jones, Dupree, nobody's getting going in that Wisconsin backfield. And I have to tell you, based on what I've seen so far with my eyes, what they tell me is I don't know if we're going to get a consistent option in that Wisconsin backfield this year. What I've seen through 3 games has not been very impressive, especially against some of the non-power teams that they've played this year. I'm kind of losing faith in that Wisconsin backfield. And if I had one of those guys on my roster, I probably would have already flipped them by now. I think Syracuse is worth revisiting because there was a meltdown on Discord. Daryl Gill was one of those players in week 1. Remember, Josh Cameron for Baylor was another one, and then he bounced back with 2 good performances. But Daryl Gill, right now, after 3 weeks, given what happened in week 1 and all of the meltdown about Daryl Gill in that Syracuse passing game, we're 3 weeks into the season and Daryl Gill is now the leading receiver for Syracuse, right? So what am I saying? Am I saying we should be holding Daryl Gill? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that right now, Daryl Gill right now is the top receiver on the Syracuse roster. There's a good chance he may end the top receiver on the Syracuse roster. But I'm going to bring it back to my notes and observations from just last week. The last couple of weeks, I've made a point to mention this, and that is I just don't know about Syracuse. I don't know about their schedule. I feel like there's going to be a lot of inconsistencies along the way. Daryl Gill's going to end up being a really good receiver. I think his numbers are going to be really good. Are you going to get the consistency from him that we need? Right now, that's debatable. Right now, Daryl Gill looks like a better option for you guys that drafted him in best ball leagues than in redraft leagues because you are going to get what looks like some big weeks, but you're not going to get consistent weeks. I'm going to tell you what I think about Syracuse right now. I feel like Virginia Tech 2 years ago under Brent Pry really snuck up on some people and had that good year that he was a head coach, that he came on that first year. And the last 2 years, they just really haven't been that good. Everybody figured him out. And I think he took advantage of that first year, that roster that he had. And he's no longer there. He got let go this week. And I'm wondering if Fran Brown is in that similar situation where last year they looked good, they had that good offense, and I'm wondering if the shine is kind of coming off that penny a little bit at Syracuse, and that's going to be a long-term plan that sticks for Syracuse. I feel like Fran Brown's year one at Syracuse reminded me a little bit of Pry's first year at Virginia Tech. And I think the schedule is going to catch up to Syracuse this year. And I think next year is going to be a real telling year for Syracuse and Fran Brown. But I just don't see any consistency. And then we had Yassine Willis, who's out hurt. Does he come back this week? Does he play? This Syracuse roster has really left a lot of fantasy owners in a bond or with a lot of question marks in the back of their head. Then we go to TCU. Wide receiver Eric McAllister, also been a topic of conversation. I believe, based on what I've seen, that Jordan Dwyer is the wide receiver one in the TCU offense. From the 2 games I've seen and watched, that's what it seems to me. That's what my eyes tell me. But let's remember this. I don't think we want to draw too bold of a conclusion right now because, one, TCU did trounce North Carolina 48-14 in a game that got ugly pretty quickly, right? So McAllister in that passing game wasn't needed, but still Jordan Dwyer got his targets and his looks and his catches. And then TCU basically walked through Abilene Christian where they didn't need him. TCU gets SMU this week. I think this is the week, if you have Eric McAllister, you're going to find out this week, I believe, if your investment in his draft, in him on draft day is going to pay off. I believe this is a week where many fantasy owners decide whether or not or what to do with TCU wide receiver Eric McAllister. Now, let's go to Tennessee because we remember what I said. We have to trust our eyes. First of all, I had a nice little laugh with Mike earlier this week because I told him that he owes me a beer. If you go back and watch the preseason shows, I told him that I would take, we had the debate on who would we take, Joey Aguilar at Tennessee or Nico at UCLA. He took Nico. I said I want Aguilar in that Josh Heupel offense. The good thing about Joey Aguilar in that game against Georgia, even though Tennessee didn't win, they probably should have won and could have won had they made that field goal. Joey Aguilar looks like he's going to be a good fantasy option this year. I know he threw up some balls, but he's got receivers that make plays that can make plays downfield. And let's talk about the receivers real quick because Mike Matthews was the projected wide receiver one in the preseason, and that the talk was Tennessee really did not have many options behind Mike Matthews. That if the ball went in the air, most likely it was going to be him. Well, Chris Brazzell and Braylon Staley look like better playmakers in the passing game than Mike Matthews right now. I'd rather have those two guys than Matthews. Now, let's turn our attention to the backfield where Deshaun Bishop, Peyton Lewis were supposed 1A, 1B going into the season. And then you had Star Thomas come in. Remember, Star Thomas, much like Mike Washington, much like Seth McGowan, both of those guys playing really well. He was at New Mexico State at one time, right? Star Thomas transferred to Duke. Now he's at Tennessee. It may not be the case. It may not play out this way, but it feels like to me, Star Thomas might be their best back. Right now, if I had to invest any fantasy capital in a player right now, for some reason, Star Thomas to me looks like the best running back on the roster. We'll see how that plays out moving forward, but that's just what my eyes tell me right now. Let's go to Oregon. And I mentioned Oregon at the top of the show. They're just running through opponents right now. Like I feel like when you look at Oregon's schedule, like where are they going to lose? Are they going to lose at Penn State when they play that game? Will they get stymied when they hit the road to go to Iowa? Will it be at the end of the year where maybe they get complacent and go to Washington? Man, Oregon looks so good right now. They look like, and I know we could say this every year at the beginning of the season because they steamroll their opponents, but they just look like they're just going to go and they look like the one team that's a slam dunk for the college football playoff. I mean, I'm doing projections this week, and I'm projecting six running backs in the backfield for Oregon. That never happens with any team, hardly any year. And I'm projecting six running back projections, six deep in the Oregon backfield. The ball's being spread around in the passing game. And you just wonder moving forward, a team like Oregon that's so stacked that we knew Oregon was going to be good, but did we know they were going to be this good? And it's like, man, if we knew they were going to be this dominant, you almost have to scale back your fantasy expectations because, man, they're just spreading it around. So I think a lot of us may have learned a lesson this year. We got to be really careful when we jump on these real dominant teams. Remember, that's how it kind of was a little bit with the Georgia backfield, the domination. There was in the beginning of the season. It's like you really couldn't put a Georgia running back one too high because they were going to rotate so many backs throughout that backfield. That's what Oregon feels to me right now. It's like how even, and then the situation with Mekhi Hughes. And I think that'll lead me into my next point because, in the Discord, there's a lot of conversation I like to pick up on. I don't get involved, but I always have eyes on the Discord. I see almost everything that goes on in there, and I just kind of use it as fuel for the show or what I want to talk about, right? And so, there was a lot of discussion a couple of weeks ago with Mekhi Hughes. Man, we really learned a lesson. Never take a G5 transfer when he goes to a Power 4 school because it's just the next level. It's a level that they're not used to, and it's not going to work out, right? But let me give you a little bit of advice on that. I think you've got to take it on a case by case basis because if we make that assumption, then you miss out on a player like Ahmad Hardy right now at Missouri, who just absolutely went lights out last week and looks like he's going to be a really good fantasy option moving forward. So be careful about making too many assumptions. It's a case by case situation. And I think now when we look at Mekhi Hughes, what we have to realize is that that was a really good G5 player that probably could have played at any program. And he just so happened to go to one of the best teams in the country that had one of the most stacked backfields in the country. It is what it is now, right? We'll see how that plays out. But here's something to pay attention to as well. And I'm throwing this in here, and I probably should have mentioned this at the top of the show. We're moving into week 4, week 5, where some teams maybe have a bye, some teams haven't. We're getting close to that threshold where players can start saying, okay, I'm done with this season. It doesn't look like I'm going to get a lot of playing time. I'm going to use my red shirt. Maybe I transfer out of the program. We'll see what happens. But I think the next 2 weeks are real pivotal. We're going to start getting a lot of news about some guys that may be transferring or may redshirt this year. That may thin the rotation at some of these programs that have deep rotation. So we'll see how that plays out. Ole Miss, again, let's trust our eyes. Austin Simmons just doesn't look that healthy right now. Kiffin says he could play. Do you trust Kiffin? I don't. Here's what my eyes tell me. Trinidad Chambliss wins a game last week. He goes 21 of 29, throws for 353 yards and a touchdown. He runs, I think 15 attempts for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. You mean to tell me that that guy, 100% healthy, is not better than Austin Simmons at maybe 75%? I don't see how Chambliss doesn't play this week. And that acts sort of as a warm-up to me for the home matchup against LSU. I think we may see Austin Simmons on the shelf for a little while. We may have seen the baton passed if Chambliss gets to start this week, because I don't know if he plays well this week. I don't know how you put him on the shelf in that matchup against LSU. North Carolina, I think this is where we have to be careful. I've got 2 programs where, 2 examples that I'm going to talk about being careful in a case-by-case situation. North Carolina, Demon Jones last week rushes 14 times for 148 yards and a touchdown in a game against Richmond. Do you go all in on him? Do you trust that? What did your eyes tell you? Or do you have more confidence in going after Ty Edwards for West Virginia, who ran 25 times for 143 and 3 touchdowns in a win over Pitt against better competition, right? For me, if I have to prioritize all those guys, and I think most of you guys would agree, Ty Edwards is definitely going to be the investment, but sometimes you got to be careful putting too much stock into one performance. And for those of you guys that went and got Damon Jones, I wonder if that was a 1 week thing or will we see consistency throughout the year? We'll find out. But my gut tells me we'll have a better idea after this week when North Carolina goes on the road and plays at Central Florida. I'm willing to invest Ty Edwards now off of that initial performance than I am over Damon Jones at North Carolina against Richmond. Let's go to Georgia Tech. Big win against Clemson. And I've been saying this since the beginning of the year. When I look at Georgia Tech's schedule, I think it really sets up nicely. I mean, they've been unranked. And for me, Georgia Tech's schedule, if you looked at it at the beginning of the year, they had this game against Clemson, which was they had this game against Clemson, and they have that game week 14 against Georgia. If you look at Georgia Tech's schedule, it looks really good all the way through. There's a lot of talk about Miami and Florida State being the best teams in the ACC. I'd be careful. I think Georgia Tech may end up in that ACC title game. I'm not saying that they're better than Miami and they're better than Florida State, but the way the schedule sets up, I can see the Yellow Jackets playing in that ACC championship game. Um, and here's the good thing from a fantasy perspective. I know a lot of you guys were burned by Haynes King 2 weeks ago when he sat out against that weak competition. I think Georgia Tech's in a position now where they're full steam ahead. And I think Haynes King is probably one of the better, safer fantasy options moving forward, particularly given all the struggles of the top quarterbacks this year. I mean, let's just go through it. Lenore Sellis, Arch Manning, Cade Klubnik. I mean, who else up there at the top has really struggled to get off to a strong start? Haynes King may be as reliable, dependable, and productive as some of those top quarterbacks all the way through the rest of the season. I think Haynes King's going to be really good. I mentioned the Missouri Ahmad Hardy and Mackay Hughes situation. South Carolina, Lenore Sellers. Remember, here's the one thing I say about Lenore Sellers. I know he came off last week, got rocked to the head. You're looking at a concussion syndrome situation where they got to put him through the protocol. And I said this before. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on last week's show, but I did throw a shout out on the Discord because there was some concern about Alabama receiver Ryan Williams last week. And then he played and, of course, blew up and had a big week. Concussions are not great. They're not great for anybody, not great for the body, right? But when it comes to college fantasy football, the concussion or any type of similar type injury, those are quote unquote the best injuries that your player can have, because if they get their bell rung and they go into concussion protocol, what happens is that it's no physical limitations to their body. It's really just it's their head, right? So what happens is they either get cleared or they don't. They're either mentally cleared or they're cleared from a head standpoint, from a neurological standpoint. The doctors either clear them or they don't. And if they get cleared, there's no other physical ailment. So you're getting 100% all in or they're 100% out. To me, that's better than having a guy with a shoulder injury coming back from an ankle injury, and whether or not they're actually 100%, 90%, 80%. Concussions are never great, but from an injury standpoint for college fantasy football, concussions are usually the best injury because there's usually a clear cut they're in or clear cut out. Let's look at Washington because Damon Williams has actually been a little bit of a disappointment too. Let's go ahead and throw him on that list with Klubnik and Sellers and all the other guys. 3 touchdowns in 3 games, 2 passing, 1 rushing. After 3 games, you would not expect that from Damon Williams, but Jonah Coleman has been an absolute gem this year. 7 touchdowns in the first 3 games of the season. I think what we're going to see is we're going to see that level out as time goes on. I think you're going to see some of those touchdowns come back to Damon Williams. I don't know if that pace is going to be able to be kept up by Jonah Coleman. I think you're going to see some of those touchdowns go back into the passing game, and that's good if you have Damon Williams and you have wide receiver Denzel Boston. Arizona State, let's talk about them for a second. Because first of all, I think Kyson Brown being out, Raleek Brown is really taking advantage of that situation. I can see where Raleek Brown has basically rubber stamped the starting role now because he's been good while he's getting the opportunity. He's producing. There's nothing that he's doing that suggests that Kyson Brown could be any better coming into that lineup. Now, here's the one thing that I say about Arizona State. Maybe we missed a little bit on Arizona State projecting them because when I watch Arizona State, there was one thing that happened last week that was good. Now, Jordan Tyson's going to be fantastic from a fantasy standpoint. And I think Sam Levitt is going to be okay too. Maybe not as good as we thought he was going to be in the preseason. But when I watch Arizona State, it's the ground game and Jordan Tyson. They did get the tight end involved, Medier, into the passing game last week, which they needed. But really, that's it from Arizona State. If it's not Levitt, Medier, Jordan Tyson, Raleek Brown right now, there are no other options in that Arizona State offense right now. And now I start to look back and I'm thinking, man, was Cam Skattebo really just that influential on the offense last year that he made them really good? Because right now, Arizona State doesn't look very good and they just don't have a lot of depth. Like if a Jordan Tyson goes down, almost wondering like what the heck are they going to do, right? So hopefully he stays healthy this year. From a fantasy standpoint, we love it. We love tight rotations. We love surefire running back one, surefire wide receiver one, surefire quarterback one. But just from an overall perspective, as I watch Arizona State, not a lot of depth there. They are basically focused in on two or three guys in that offense right now. Arizona, LSU. Let's go to LSU because Garrett Nussmeier, add him on the list of underperforming quarterbacks this year. Came out that maybe he's dealing with some shoulder fatigue. Brian Kelly said it looks like it's going to take the bye week before he's just going to need some rest. But I think he plays this week against Southeastern. Would they rest him this week? Here's my thought on LSU players this week. I know they play Southeastern Louisiana, and I know they're saying Nussmeier has that shoulder injury that needs rest. They have a bye. I'm sorry, they play Southeastern, then they have Ole Miss, then they have a bye. I don't think they can afford to give Garrett Nussmeier the week off right here, to be honest with you. I think if you have Garrett Nussmeier, if you have running back Caden Durham, and you have receiver Aaron Anderson, I think you have to play him this week. I think LSU, coming off of their last couple of performances, they need to get the oil. They need to get the engine oiled, right? They need to get everything clicking. I can see where LSU invests a lot into this game, particularly in the first half, to get that offense clicking for that matchup next week because they're going to need to get things rolling if they're going to go on the road and win at Ole Miss next week. I think Nussmeier, Caden Durham, and Aaron Anderson could be in for a decent week because I think LSU has to get the offense cranked up this week. And if they don't do it against Southeastern Louisiana, I don't know how they're going to be able to do it against Ole Miss. And then let's just end with Texas. Of course, Arch Manning has kind of, I've kind of put him under. Look, I put Nico under the, I was pretty harsh on Nico last year. And I have to tell you, from what I've seen from Arch Manning this year, it's even worse than what Nico was last year. Let me just say this and I feel like I want to kind of stop talking about this, but it's when Texas moves out of these non-conference games, I think we're going to learn a lot about what's really going on. But again, I tell you guys, trust your eyes. And here's what I see at Texas right now. I'm looking at Arch Manning throwing a pass to a running back out of the backfield that floats so far over the running back's head late in the game that the running back looked back at him and basically threw up his arms. And I think at this point, the drum is just beating louder and louder. And I'm just wondering, like the players have to realize internally too, inside the team, that there's just something that's not right when he's throwing 10-yard passes at the feet of the receivers, right? When I look at Texas's schedule as they come out of this week, I look at their schedule and I say, with Arch Manning playing the way that he's playing, how do they beat Oklahoma? How do they beat Georgia? And how do they beat Texas A&M? I don't see it. But you know what's interesting about that is that given the way that Arch Manning is actually playing, the remaining games on Texas's schedule is at Florida, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Vanderbilt at home, and Arkansas at home. I'm just saying, like, You cannot say that there's a definite win on that schedule right now with the way that Arch Manning is playing quarterback. And I'm not saying Texas is going to lose all their SEC games, but boy, I don't know how they survive that schedule if Arch Manning is playing like a high school quarterback. Um, and here's the thing too, with the trust of eyes too, like be careful on the reporting, right? Like Arch Manning was all the hype, but let's go to the running backs, right? So what do we hear? CJ Baxter down with another injury again. Okay, some guys just cannot avoid the injury bug. That's why I like Trey Wisner so much. Wisner's hurt. I feel like they need Wisner back. And you know what? Here's the thing, though. You hear guys talk about about Gibson. You hear guys talk about how, and maybe in the media and some Texas fans, that Christian Clark supposedly the most talented running back on the roster. From what I've seen about Christian Clark, that guy's not better than Trey Wisner. Like my eyes tell me when I watch Christian Clark, I'm wondering if it's the same guys that are saying he's the best running back on the roster are the same guys that saying Arch Manning is a Heisman candidate, because I don't see anything special when I watch Christian Clark. Now maybe I'll be proven wrong, much like I'll be proven wrong by Arch Manning. But when I look at Texas, I think to myself, you know what they need to do this week? They have a really good defense. They cannot lose the support of the defense. They really just need to crank up the ground game. Hopefully Wisner's healthy. Hopefully he comes back. Hopefully they give him a heavy dose and he carries the ground game and they complement him with Gibson and Clark if Baxter's going to be out. And Texas decides, you know what, the way that we need to do this is maybe through the ground and not through the air, and maybe we just run our ground game. And you know what else they need to do? And this was something that Texas has been really good at, but I'm not seeing this year. Get the balls to the backs out of the backfield. Let Manning throw those little bitty, let him throw those balls out of the backfield to receivers. Let him complete some easy passes, get it in the hands of the playmakers and let them make plays. And right now, while he's struggling and they're trying to force the ball to Ryan Wingo downfield, um, let him hit some of these backs out of the backfield. Maybe Texas's offense just needs to go short and play the ground game because their defense is really good. And that's going to be good enough to keep them in the running. But man, the way Arch Manning's playing, I don't know how he stays the starting quarterback halfway through the year. He just looked that bad to me. But anyway, that's enough. I just had to get that out because it just frustrates me how somebody that hyped up receives that much attention has made. Texas fans have to be wondering how this is the guy we paid all those millions of dollars to if they're paying him, because like, man, I don't know what they're getting I don't know what the ROI is right now. It's not very good. So anyway, that's going to do it. That's my rant on Arch Manning. I've given him what, 3 weeks, and I'm not seeing any improvement from him. And again, another cupcake matchup this week for Texas, but they've got to find out how to get the short game going and get that running game going if they're going to compete in the SEC. But that's going to do it. That's going to do it for the Week 4 show. Thanks to everybody that is really kind of keeping up with that 4-1 Super Fantasy League. Man, it is super competitive. I'm going to try to give you guys updates on that every week with the elimination and the head-to-head tournament about to start. But that's the rundown for the Week 4 show. Again, thanks to everyone contributing to the Helmet Blitz. If you want to see your team up there, go ahead, get your contribution in. I'll make sure we get that helmet up on the shelf. But good luck to everyone in Week 4. Good luck to your teams. I'll see you next week in Week 5. Till then.